This person is sick and tired of working with a terrible assistant. But when things don't change after talking to his boss, he decides to take matters into his own hands. No one likes being yelled at while working, least of all this guy. So when this Karen finally leaves, he goes to great lengths to make sure it never happens again. This man builds a strong bond with his friend's grandpa, but these entitled people really don't like this, and try their best to stop the man from inheriting anything when the grandpa passes away. But what surprise clause did the grandpa put in his will to counteract this? You'll only find out by watching this episode of VoiceyHere's Entitled Parents, featuring ProRevenge. This story was called A Unique Way to Share Your Money Among Your Heirs in a Way That Is Actually Fair. This story is the story of a good friend of mine's grandfather, and how he dealt with his inheritance. A very unique way. He had 2 sons, and each of them also had 2 sons. In the last half year of his life, my friend and me visited him every morning and every evening. You see, he did not want to go into a retirement home, and apart from getting ready in the morning and in the evening, he did not really need help. Now I need to explain something real quick. Back in the day, we still have mandatory service in the army for 12 months. But there was several ways around it. I will only explain the most common way, since it is connected to our story. You see, instead of going to the army, you could say you refused to go to the army for ethical reasons, which was really just a formality. You simply wrote a 1-page essay why you think being in the army would violate your personal ethics, and they pretty much had to accept it. But that meant you have to go into civil service. Civil service could be any kind of job that in a wider sense is a service to society. So these jobs range from kindergarten to retirement homes and anything in between, like hospitals, homes for the physically or mentally disabled, Meals on Wheels, pretty much anything you can imagine. You would be paid for that time the same amount of money you would get in the army, and had the right to certain perks like a free room, health insurance, work clothes, etc. The same stuff any soldier gets. Plus soldiers get free food. You either got free food or a food allowance. I did my time in a retirement home, and it was an awesome experience. I think a job like that really widens your horizons as a young arrogant brat, and really matures you, and shows you what is actually important in life. Back to the story. I was just done with my time in the retirement home, and for 1 year simply wanted a job to make some money. Then one of my best friends comes to me and tells me he needs my help. His grandpa can no longer do everything by himself, but really only needs help in the morning to get ready and in the evening. Since I have learned how to do this from real professionals, he asks me to show him, so his grandpa does not yet have to go into a retirement home. He was one of my best friends, and I really liked his grandpa. When I was younger, I did not have a grandpa, but we visited him all the time, and I became his unofficial 5th grandson. So of course I said yes. The original plan was to show him for 2 to 3 weeks, and then observe for another 2 to 3 weeks. Then he would do it on his own, but we ended up doing it together for over half a year. Then Grandpa had a stroke and died within 2 days in the hospital. 2 days later, my friend asked me to come with him to the lawyer where the last will would be spread. His grandfather had specifically asked that his will should be read the day before he gets buried, which is quite unusual, but not illegal as such. I asked why he wanted me there, and he told me the lawyer had officially invited me, since Grandpa had left me something as a thank you for my service. I was a bit embarrassed, but also happy that Grandpa had thought so highly of my service, he even put me in his last will. Now, my friend's dad is an entitled jerk, and the same goes for his uncle. We arrived there and went into the room. "Why the heck are you here? I know that Dad called you in jest his 5th grandkid, but this is for real family." "I bet the little gold digger hoped he would get some money in the will." "I was asked to be here by the lawyer. Take it up with him. I have no idea why I'm here." "If you pulled something to get to his money, I will sue you so hard, even your kids will still need lawyers." "Show some respect and stop shouting. I know you two did not really give a crap about your dad, but show at least a minimum of respect." "How dare you talk like that to your elders, you little crap. You two get exactly as much respect as you showed your own father. None." He really shouted the last word, and it finally shut the two up. We sat down and still had to wait for the other two grandkids to arrive. The two sat right behind us, and what they talked about really made my blood boil. Apparently they had both gotten new cars, new jewelry for the wife, and had planned a huge holiday. All that was paid for by credit, and they'd planned to pay for it with the inheritance. None of them said even a word about missing him, being sad that he died. Nothing. Only me, and money. They seemed to be in competition who could spend the inheritance faster the way they planned away the money. Then finally we were all there, and the lawyer read out a short letter. What I tell you here is a much shortened version, but the real thing was several pages. But it boils down to this. In recent years, I more and more realized that some people in my family cared a lot more about me than others. I am especially disappointed in my two sons, but I wanted to be really fair and not biased, so I came up with a point system. Letter and phone call, 1 point, plus 1 extra if it is very long. Visit, 2 points per hour, plus 1 point per hour of travel to me and back. Helping me out with something, 3 points per hour. This is the final result over the last 3 years of my life. Entitled Dad, 8 points. Entitled Uncle, 10 points. Entitled Uncle Kid, number 1, 150 points. Entitled Uncle Kid number 2, 133 points. Friend's brother, 288 points. Friend, 7,341 points. And me, 5,883 points. My lawyer has already liquidated most of my assets except the house. Once it is sold, the money will be divided by the points, so we know what each point is worth, and then every person gets a share of the money according to his points. For about a minute, you could hear a pin drop. Then both entitled Dad and Uncle started shouting at the same time that they knew we would have pulled something and this will would never stand. Of course they tried to sue, entitled Uncle, his kids and ED together, but they lost, and there was a secret clause. Not really secret, it was simply not read to us that day, so nobody realized it was in there since we all assumed everything was read to us on that day by the lawyer. In the will, that if someone sues against the will, he loses his share of the inheritance. It took nearly 3 years until all the lawsuits were over. I was blown away when we finally got the money. I'm not naming a sum, but it was way more than I felt comfortable accepting, so I wanted to give at least some of it to the 3 other grandkids. But my friend finally convinced me to accept by saying to me, "You cared for him when he needed you, without expecting anything for it, which makes you 10 times more family than any of those jerks." They got what they deserved. As the story's going along, you know something's gonna happen. You know when the will is read, it's not gonna go the way of the entitled folk. But I was not expecting a point system. I didn't even know that's like a thing you could do. I guess you could do whatever you want in a will. It is your will after all. It's pretty brilliant too, because it shows to the family exactly who was caring for him and who was completely ignoring him. You can tell by the low scores of the entitled Dad and Uncle and the medium scores of the kids. Obviously, whenever something was needed by the granddad, they just made their kids do it because I guess they didn't care. Well, I bet they're regretting it now. And he must have known them too well, placing in a secret clause so that if anyone sues anyone else, they get nothing. It's not like they were getting much anyway. I just crunched some of the numbers, and let's just say the inheritance was $1 million. The entitled uncle would only be getting $723. This story was called 3 Strikes and You're Out? Cool, I got this. I work in sales, and we work as a team. I have an assistant who helps me get leads and set appointments. Well, this one particular assistant and I did not get along at all. This particular assistant kept going to my boss behind my back to report every little incident, which is really freaking annoying. Part of my role as the senior rep was training. However, this assistant was a former business owner and knew how to do the job and didn't need no help. Well, the appointments the assistant set up had an 80% no-show rate, which is insane. In the past, no-shows would be around 25 to 30%. Not only that, this assistant would constantly argue and bicker over everything, which was really frustrating to deal with. This assistant also created their own lead card and tracking system, which completely sucked and crap fell through all the time. Furthermore, about half of all contact details provided didn't actually work. But what really irked me the most is this assistant constantly sucked up to my manager about all the great things they were doing. My manager was in love with the assistant and kept preventing me from firing the assistant and replacing them. Now, our company had a little known policy: 3 ethic complaints in a 12-month period and you're fired. Here's the deal though, for a customer to file a complaint, they had to go to a specific page on our website, so very few complaints ever got filed. One day, I roll in 10 minutes late. My assistant had called my manager to complain that I was late. My boss asked me why I'm late. Keep in mind, we didn't clock in or out, and I often would come in early and stay late. To come in late once in a while was no big deal, but it was annoying knowing my assistant had a habit of constantly going behind my back and ratting me out, on top of their crappy production. We are supposed to be a team. I asked to do a review of the assistant's leads. We got 3 leads deep, and my assistant huffed and puffed and said the leads belonged to them, not me, and it's none of my business. Actually it is. They then called my boss to complain about my behavior because I was pushing them to complete the lead review. My boss called me and I straight up told him he needs to give me the authority to fire this assistant or I'm going to force his hand. He told me I needed to learn how to work with my assistant. So I pulled up all the assistant's leads and began dialing. One thing that would justify an ethics complaint is opting in a lead for a call when they didn't want to be called, which I suspected I could find at least 3 instances of. I called all of the leads and got 9 people who straight up said, "We never intended to be opted into given sales calls," to which I replied, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. We actually have an ethic complaints page for such a situation. Would you like me to forward you the link so you can file a complaint? It would really help us ensure this kind of thing doesn't happen again." Within 48 hours, my assistant had gotten 5 ethics complaints. My boss called me 72 hours later. "It's really strange we've gotten a slew of complaints about your assistant. Did you have any part of this?" Well, you see, my assistant refused to conduct a lead review with me, so I called all of their leads for them. On a few occasions, the lead claimed they didn't intend on providing their information for sales calls, so I simply sent them to the link to file a complaint. My boss said, "Yeah, well, now I'm forced to fire the assistant." I simply smiled and said, "Oh, that's really unfortunate. I'm so sorry to hear that." He confided, "I guess you won this one." I said, "Not a problem. I'll go ahead and post the new job ad." My next assistant was much better and way easier to work with. Nobody likes an unsolicited phone call. If a stranger from a business is calling you, it's usually because they're selling something. So if there's one thing you can do to motivate someone to leave a complaint, it would have to be an unsolicited call. The hero of our story is almost too good at their job though. Working in sales is all about calling people to action, which they did. 5 people left complaints. But going from almost nobody leaving a complaint to then 5 people in one day, yeah, pretty suspicious. It's no wonder the boss called them up on it. But hey, I think they proved that they're pretty good at their job. This story was called "Karen Chews Us Out Over Milkshake. I Get Her Fired." So I used to work at this restaurant in the downtown city. Terrible job experience, but it was a job. One day, we get slammed. Usually it's because of a game night, since this burger place is right behind a baseball field. But this day was different. First of all, I was already ticked. Coworker who thought he was the manager showed up an hour late, so I had to open the entire front of the restaurant alone within 30 minutes because people were already waiting in the parking lot. Coworker shows up. I don't say a word to him. Oh well, move on with the day. Day goes on, and I come in for my shift. Soccer teams come over after a tournament. I'm talking about 100 players with a line out the door. On shifts like this, some of the kitchen staff had to drop everything and help the other front of house employees, including myself, deliver orders because we're taking orders, cleaning tables, putting orders together, delivering them, serving drinks. I did this when I was 18. And making milkshakes. Customers were great. All of the players that came in were so nice and we had no issues. No impatience, no complaints, nothing. Just a nice day. They tipped us nicely as well, so we really appreciated that. I should probably mention at this point that we take DoorDash orders, which is where Karen comes in. For those of you who don't know, DoorDashers are people who are paid by a customer to go get food from a restaurant and bring it to them. We get in our usual rush, and me and 3 other co-workers are obviously multitasking and rushing to keep everyone happy. DoorDash tablet goes off. I confirm it and start prepping the order. Mind you, this included a milkshake. I'm not going to go ahead and make the milkshake because goodness only knows when this woman is going to show up. Rest of the order is ready to go, and she shows up while we're helping other customers. Let me tell you about this woman. By definition, a Karen. She has the typical Karen cut, with the eyes of a freaking White Walker. I'm talking bright blue eyes, obviously fake because they were Twitter logo blue and almost solid, that peer into your soul in a split second. I swear, I saw the gates of hell in her eyes, so I'm just going to call her Karen. She starts getting impatient and asks me how much longer it'll be. I apologize and tell her that it won't be much longer, and I go to start the milkshake. She starts flipping out at my co-workers, and as I'm passing her to get the rest of the DoorDash order, she starts laying it on me, screaming at me because I didn't have the milkshake ready, and that I was costing her tips. The woman was wearing Lululemon yoga pants and had expensive color contacts in. She would be fine without $3. Sort of manager comes out to talk to her. Let's call him C. C comes out and explains the situation. She doesn't accept what he's saying and starts screaming in front of 200 people about how she won't get tips and how hard is it to make one milkshake. Karen gives us the typical, I want to speak to the manager, and the manager just so happens to be C. He tells her he is the manager. He asks her to leave, and she continues her rant, calling C a coward about 5 or 6 times. Karen finally leaves. I'm fuming about this lunatic coming in and making everyone uncomfortable, so I do a little digging. Turns out, if you go onto the tablet, you can find the previous DoorDashers who come into the restaurant to get orders. I remember the name of the customer who ordered, so I go onto the tablet to find the DoorDasher's name. I find her name and cell phone number on the order history and information. I get into contact with the DoorDash company and explain the harassment we endured from Karen and give them her name and contact number, saying she was from this city. They tell me they'll look into it. They contacted me later and informed me that it was taken care of and we never saw her again, as she regularly took orders from us. We all went on our merry way and occasionally called each other cowards as our own little inside joke. I haven't worked anywhere where they have DoorDashers, but I can imagine it's such a stressful thing to have. Not only do you have customers who are impatiently waiting for their food, but then you have these people who it's now their job to collect this food for somebody else who's a hungry customer, and if they don't get it in time, then they're on the line. So I understand why they'd be stressed if they've arrived and the order wasn't ready, but the employees who are working there can't control how many customers are coming in ordering food. And I'm pretty sure the person who ordered the food would much rather a fresh milkshake than one that's been sitting there for half an hour. If you'd like your story to be narrated by me, don't forget to visit the subreddit r/VoiceyHere, link below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Alright, I'll see you in the next one.